After smoking for more than half a century, Glenn Cooper has found it impossible to quit.
Well, I've had 3 heart attacks, I've had a triple bypass, and 2 with stents in them, and I can't play sports anymore and things like that, so it's knocked me about a bit.
At 68, the disability pensioner smokes 40 cigarettes a day.
You give up real meals, you eat the basics, right? You're always looking for the cheap stuff to buy. Because like I said, I know it's stupidity, it might sound... How stupid are you to sit down and spend $62 on a packet of smokes and not have a real meal? Well, unfortunately, it's like an addiction.
In Melbourne, an underworld war is waging over the illicit tobacco trade, and almost 100 arson attacks have been recorded since March last year. Glenn refuses to buy the vastly cheaper product, even though he has every reason to.
I'm on a disability pension, roughly $1,200 a fortnight. No? Like I said, I just spent $250 on a carton of smokes yesterday. Right, my rent's $800 a fortnight. Doesn't leave me much. Right?
There's barely anything left.
There's nothing left, really.
In plain sight, the illicit price point is irresistible. Branded illegal smokes are openly carried in southeast Melbourne. How much did this cost you? The packets in this carton of 10 were bought for just $15 each. In Victoria, a licensing scheme for tobacco retailers is still yet to be implemented by the state government. Those trying to do the right thing are feeling the pinch.
I do not want to support illegal tobacco. Right? Although the government's shafting us over it all, I still will not support criminalisation, criminals, selling tobacco.
The national adult smoking rate is sitting between 10 and 11%. It's been in decline since strict plain packaging laws and steep tax increases were imposed on tobacco products almost 15 years ago.
There's a very clear body of evidence internationally and here in Australia that price signals, raising the price of tobacco, is a very important tool in the toolbox of reducing smoking rates.
But there are fears Australia's mission to reduce the daily rate to just 5% by 2030 is going backwards.
We got advice sort of 12 to 18 months ago that steady reduction we'd seen really over the course of 30 years had started to stagnate, and that was in part a product of the lack of any real change in tobacco control, which had meant effectively that the tobacco industry had started to find ways around the regulations that were put in place, particularly plain packaging regulations put in place a little more than a decade ago.
At some point, the federal government in particular will have to admit that they have got this policy wrong and they will have to change tack.
Criminologist James Martin says the government's tax policy has pushed prices so high, smokers are finding cheaper cigarettes on the black market. The latest increase to tobacco excise came a week ago, pushing the average packet of 25 legal smokes to almost $50. This tax on tobacco products generates billions for the federal government, but in the last budget, forecast excise revenue was revised down from $14.7 billion in 2 years' time to $10.7 billion by 2027-28.
So there's a $5 billion hole in the federal budget. Now that's not due, again, primarily to people quitting smoking, but rather taking that money, instead of paying tax on it, paying for a legal product that is going straight into the hands of organised crime.
The predicted excise shortfalls may go further. All tobacco retailers over the last 12 months have reported significant losses, and as of July, almost a third of the legal tobacco market has dropped off. Industry data obtained by 7:30 indicates a 29% decline in the number of cigarette pack sales from July last year to July this year.
That's absolute freefall. Those are unsustainable drops in sales, and we're well on the way to not having any legal tobacco sold in Australia. That would be fantastic news if that drop was primarily driven by people quitting smoking, but it's not. It's primarily driven by people preferencing the black market.
So when do you think that this policy turned from effective to problematic?
That's a really good question. It looks to be sometime in the past, I'd say 18 to 24 months, we've started to see really significant declines in the sale of legal tobacco that have been far outstripping the declines in smoking. And that's around the same time that we've started to see a really exponential jump in the level of illicit tobacco being trafficked into the country.
Detections at the border signal a bigger beast consuming the country. The Australian Border Force says the record amount of illicit tobacco seized in the last financial year was worth almost $3 billion in lost tax.
And we know that that's just a small fraction of the cigarettes that are actually successfully being trafficked into the country.
Last year, the federal government tightened laws around tobacco advertising, branding and flavouring to make tobacco products less appealing to new smokers. In July, the government announced an extra almost $200 million investment in enforcement, and in September next year, again, the excise will increase. There is universal acknowledgement that the black market poses a serious threat to reducing smoking rates, but the strategy to address it has divided people. Should tobacco products be made cheaper?
Yes, yeah, I would argue. I recognise there are a lot of political obstacles to making something like that available, but I think we're well past the point of utility where our tobacco taxes are currently calibrated.
Would that bring more people back to smoking?
Well, it depends. If people are price sensitive to smoking, which is the widespread consensus that they are, then the widespread availability of black market tobacco that is cheaper than tobacco that could be purchased a decade ago, that also would be encouraging people into smoking again.
There is no significant body, whether it's the World Bank or the IMF or the World Health Organisation, who say that you should try to make formal cigarettes cheaper because of the threat of illicit tobacco. I mean, you need to take both markets on in a full frontal way.
What we've seen so far is that the prevalence of smoking decreased at a similar rate during the period of tax increase from 2010 to 2020 as it did prior to the tax increase between 2001 and 2010. What we're also seeing is that the rates of decline in smoking prevalence was not consistent across different population groups.
Public health researcher Ed Jegasothi has been researching the decline in smoking over the last 20 years. He says tax increases didn't accelerate the decline in smoking in lower socioeconomic areas.
The prevalence of smoking has decreased. It's not clear how much of that is attributable to the increases in price, but we can certainly say that the rates of smoking has declined more sharply in the rest of the population compared with the population groups that we're looking at: lower socioeconomic status, First Nations populations, people with mental illnesses, and other disadvantaged and marginalised groups.
3 hours east of Darwin in West Arnhem Land.
3 goals won to the Eagles, 19. Second half starting now.
At the Currang Sports Carnival, everyone is talking about healthy lifestyle choices.
You play a better game of footy if you're not playing smoking.
Oh, you got someone wondering you need 1 goal.
It's here where Australia's and one of the world's worst smoking rates persists.
More than half of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander adults in this region smoke, and so smoking has an enormous impact on the community's lives out here. While smoking prevalence is coming down below 40% in towns and cities, it hasn't really changed in remote areas.
In the top end, Professor David Thomas's team is highly supportive of raising the price of tobacco.
We worked with Outback stores in 32 remote communities and found at the time of the annual 12.5% tax rises a few years ago that at the time of each tax rise, sales dropped.
Do you think the government's goal of reducing smoking prevalence to 5% by 2030 is possible?
Yes, I think it is possible, and I think it's possible because of the updated regulations we put through the Parliament last year. And it really does introduce some very important changes to make tobacco less and less attractive, particularly to new smokers, frankly. So we're confident we can get down to 5% because of the changes we put into place last year.
In government advertising, preventing a fresh generation of smokers is at the centre of its messaging. But for Glenn, whose habit is entrenched, the warnings are falling on deaf ears.
The people that smoke the most are the down and outers, the ones that are living in poverty, the ones that are the least wages and everything like that. You know, they might say, why can't these people give it up? Well, they're addicted to it.